There's a specific kind of person who can leave a party early, not because something went wrong, but because everything went fine, and still feel more relieved walking to their car alone than they did the entire time they were inside. If you've ever done that, if you've ever felt a quiet exhale when plans get canceled, if you've ever found yourself choosing a long drive with your own thoughts over a dinner table full of conversation, this video is for you. Not because something is wrong with you, but because something has never quite been named for you. Here's what most people assume about people like you: that you're shy, antisocial, afraid, lonely by default, that preferring solitude is a deficit, something you're working around, compensating for, slowly trying to fix. But what if that's not even close to the truth? What if preferring solitude over social status isn't a flaw in your wiring, but a feature of a very specific kind of mind? From the outside, here's what this looks like. You pass on things other people seem excited about: group trips, networking events, packed social calendars. You don't post much, you don't perform much. You're selective about who gets your time in a way that can look to others like arrogance or indifference. You might have a small circle, maybe very small, and you've probably been told at some point in your life that you should want more friends, more presence, more visibility. And the confusing part is, sometimes you wonder if they're right. But here's what's actually happening internally. It's not that social connection doesn't matter to you. It's that shallow connection costs you something deep. Every surface-level interaction, the small talk, the performance, the exhausting maintenance of appearances, draws from a reserve that doesn't refill quickly. And somewhere underneath that, there's something even more specific. You don't just want connection, you want real connection, the kind where you don't have to translate yourself, the kind where the conversation actually goes somewhere. And because that kind is rare, you've learned almost instinctively to protect your energy for it. This is rooted in identity, specifically in how your self-concept was formed. People who prefer solitude tend to develop a strong interior relationship with themselves early. Their inner world becomes rich, detailed, and genuinely interesting to them. And once that happens, the outer world, particularly the performative, status-driven parts of it, starts to feel thin by comparison. It's not rejection of people, it's loyalty to depth. Think back to being around 8 years old. Maybe it was after a birthday party, or a school event, or a family gathering that everyone else seemed to love. And you remember the ride home, looking out the window, finally quiet, feeling something that wasn't sadness exactly, more like relief, like you'd been holding your breath for 3 hours and only now remembered how to exhale. Nobody taught you that. Nobody told you that's what you needed. You just knew. And what's interesting is, you probably didn't tell anyone, because even then, you understood that it would be hard to explain, that it would sound wrong somehow. So you filed it away, a preference that felt almost like a secret. What it feels like from the inside is something like this: noise that you can't always name, a constant low-level processing that never really turns off. You notice things other people miss. You absorb the emotional temperature of a room before you even sit down. And that's not a gift that comes free. It's taxing. Solitude for you isn't emptiness. It's maintenance. It's where you reassemble yourself after a world that constantly asks you to fragment. And here's where it gets complicated, because you want connection, deeply, sometimes almost painfully, but you also need space. And those two things can feel like they're working against each other, like every time you protect your solitude, you're somehow pushing connection further away. You want to be known, but being really seen requires a kind of vulnerability that most social environments don't make safe. So you wait for the right person, the right conversation, the right moment. And sometimes the waiting is so long it starts to look from the outside like not caring at all. But there's a shadow version of this, and it's worth naming honestly. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes what looks like chosen solitude is actually avoidance. It's not that you prefer depth, it's that surface-level interaction has failed you enough times that withdrawal feels safer than risk. The preference for solitude becomes a wall, not a filter. The difference matters. One is knowing what you need, the other is protecting a wound. And only you know, quietly, honestly, which one you're operating from right now. There's a term for something a lot of people in this space carry: often without knowing it. It's called introjected extroversion. It's the internalized belief that you should want what society rewards: visibility, social volume, a wide network, external validation. Not because you actually want those things, but because you've absorbed over years the message that wanting them is what healthy people do. And what happens is, you start to feel vaguely defective for preferring solitude, like it's a symptom of something you haven't dealt with yet. But for a lot of people, that guilt isn't information about who they are. It's residue from a world that was never designed with them in mind. In practice, this shapes everything: how you move through career spaces, preferring deep work to visibility, often underestimating how much people notice you; how you love, intensely and carefully, sometimes terrifyingly so; how you make decisions, slowly, internally, with more thought than most people realize is happening; and how you handle conflict, which often you don't, because the energy cost of confrontation with someone who won't actually hear you feels like a bad trade. The honest cost of this trait? You can disappear, slowly, quietly, in plain sight, because when the world consistently rewards extroversion, rewards people who show up loud, your kind of presence can go unrecognized, and over time that invisibility can start to feel like it means something about your worth. It doesn't, but it can start to feel that way. Here's the reframe that actually holds up. In every functioning group throughout human history, there were people who moved outward, gathering, networking, performing social bonds. And there were people who moved inward, processing, observing, conserving energy for what mattered. You weren't the outsider of the tribe. You were its strategist, its witness, the one who noticed what everyone else missed because they were too busy being seen. That's not a personality flaw that evolution forgot to correct. That's a feature that survived for a reason. Not everyone who is quiet is afraid. Some people are simply selective, and selectivity at its best is a form of self-respect. Solitude isn't the absence of connection, it's the condition for the only kind of connection that actually counts. If you've watched this far, I want you to know something. There are more people like you than you think. People who leave early, not because they're broken, but because they're honest. People who choose one real conversation over 10 shallow ones. People who have always felt slightly out of sync with a world that measures belonging by volume. You are not behind. You are not deficient. You are not a project. You are someone who has always known, even when it was inconvenient, what actually matters to you. You're not antisocial, you're depth-seeking, in a world that often mistakes noise for connection and visibility for value. If any part of this felt like something you've always known but never heard said out loud, drop a comment. I read them. And if you want more of this kind of psychological mirror work, subscribe. There's more to come.